Well, thank you. I'm intrigued by the conceptualization of government as a social contract, based on the Greco-Roman ideas of democracy and biblical covenants shaped by the Enlightenment. In this social contract, we the people and we the government have mutually reinforcing roles. And I'd like to suggest that many of the issues we're seeing in headlines across the country today stem at its core to a breakdown in that social contract, with one or both of us not living up to our responsibilities. So with your indulgence tonight, I'd like to briefly address two issues. One is effective citizenship, and the second is good governance. Alexander Woollcott once said that, he says, "I'm sick and tired of hearing people say democracy is broken. Of course democracy is broken. We are supposed to make it work." Justice Louis Brandeis added on top of that the most important public official is the private citizen. So what is our role as private citizens in this social contract? Well, I think we can all understand that the very basic role that we need to play is that of voting. Nationally, when we look at voting trends, in the 2012 presidential election, less than 60% of the voting eligible population cast a ballot for president. In the 2014 elections on the national level, 37% of the voting eligible population cast a ballot. Locally, we're not doing better. In our primaries that we just had this year, 27% of our population 18 and over cast a ballot in the primaries for mayor. And if those trends continue, we are about to select a mayor based on 13% of our voting eligible population. May I suggest we are not, as a nation or as a community, living up to our end of that social contract. And our roles go far beyond just voting. But I'm troubled when I think of what Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote in his book, The Social Contract, over 250 years ago. He said, "As soon as any man says to himself, speaking of public officials of the state, 'It doesn't matter to me,' the state is given up for lost." So how can we possibly increase citizen engagement? How can we improve our part of that social contract? Dr. Henry Thomas liked to tell me that the systems we have are perfectly designed for the results that we're getting. So let's look for a little bit at the systems, all right? We like to look at government through a particular interesting lens. We look at it through a political lens. When we think about what we need from government for it to fill its side of the social contract, what we're looking for is good governance. But we tend to look for people who, and vote them into office, who say things like, well, I'm going to run government like a business. Well, government's not a business. A business has a very clear feedback loop. They can tell if a business is doing well. It's called profit. You can look at your segmented, targeted population, your customer base, and say, all right, are my goods and services that I'm providing, are they meeting with satisfaction? Are people purchasing them? Are my sales and expenditures meeting my budget? And you can tell, looking at the bottom line, whether or not you're being effective in providing those business services. Government's not like that. Government is not like a nonprofit. Nonprofits are focused on meeting mission outcomes and satisfying their funders, and that's not what government is all about. Government is a unique entity, and we don't think of it as such. And governing is hard. Good governance is difficult. Goethe liked to say that ruling is easy. Governing is difficult. And we find ourselves in a time where we're finding difficulties in governance greater than ever. You see, we see this all clouded with this political lens, because politics is not about governance. Politics are about individuals. And in fact, politics tend to create party-reinforced personality cults. Governance is more than that. Governance is about public officials taking stewardship of the public good and of public tax revenues and delivering to the people what they need. In short, governance is about outcomes, not about people. And we get this confused because we hear people talking about governance issues, but they tend to do so with these partisan attacks. Turns out that public safety is not a partisan issue. Public education is not a partisan issue. Roads and infrastructure, debt service, garbage pickup, issuing permits and licenses, being able to take care of building upkeep and fleet maintenance, those aren't partisan issues. A pothole doesn't care what party affiliation you have. 90% of government is just getting the work done and doing it well. But we don't talk about that governance. We as a people have been compliant in this shift from policy to personality, from outcomes to conversations about photo ops and ribbon cuttings. It needs to be more than that. We need to be involved in more than that. It's not going to change until we demand change toward performance-focused governance without the partisan attacks. Now, we can do this. We know we can do this. We've seen how this plays out, but we also see how it plays out when we don't do it well. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to meet with a group of citizens in an economically distressed neighborhood. They were challenged with developing an action plan where they could leverage local resources and government action to create traction for change in their community. And one elderly woman spoke up and said, I don't feel safe in my community, but I think I would feel safer if all the streetlights worked. She was quickly shushed by the person sitting next to her and said, you can't ask for too much. Put down, we would like half our streetlights to work. Is it any wonder that in this neighborhood and in neighborhoods across this country, it feels like the social contract is broken? Now, we have to do better, and we can do better. My call tonight is for us as citizens to engage and demand accountability, first of ourselves. We need to live up to our roles in that social contract. And second, demand accountability of our local government. Our local government needs to provide the governance that we demand and not the politics that divide. Because democracy of the people, by the people, and for the people will only be broken if we, the people, fail to make it work. Thank you for being here tonight.